So welcome you all again in our second keynote session, that is the new normal, the role of innovation in the wake of the pandemic and how the adaptability of intellectual property is changing the way we work locally, regionally and globally. So we have our second keynote speaker, Mr. John Cabeca from US Intellectual Property Attaché from South Asia. So have a very warm welcome of Mr. John Cabeca. So can we have a round of applause for him? So we can't hear. So it's over to you, Mr. John.
Thank you very much, and hello everyone. It's very nice to be here today in this new environment that we're in. And I have a few thoughts that I thought I would share about the role intellectual property plays and continues to play even in the wake of this pandemic, which has taught us a lot of lessons, but I think more importantly how we can grow not only as respective countries, but also as a society as a whole. What I thought I would first do is give since we have folks from all around the world, just to give a quick overview of what it means to be an intellectual property attaché. I only have 2 slides, so bear with me, but I also think it's really important to give an overview because there's likely an IP attaché in your region. So I'm the intellectual property attaché for South Asia, so I cover India and the surrounding countries here in South Asia as it relates to intellectual property, policy, laws, regulation. And so there's primarily 3 things that an IP attaché focuses on. A big part of what we do is focused on policy advocacy, and that's working with U.S. stakeholders to improve the IP laws, policies, and regulations in the host region, understanding what their specific issues are, and then looking to find resolutions to improve their systems. And we do this within the U.S. system as well, always looking to ways to improve our system and make it even better. We also spend a lot of time working directly with the governments on U.S. government positions on law and policy, and to assist and support where we can in the improvements and enhancements that host countries are making to their respective IP laws, regulations, and guidelines. We also, through that, do a lot of capacity building in getting the word out on intellectual property, helping to change the culture in embracing and respecting intellectual property as well through public awareness programs and through training with enforcement officials and judicial training, as well as with IP professionals throughout our respective regions. And then lastly, we support U.S. stakeholders in the South Asia market with respect to due diligence, helping them understand how the court system works, how to navigate the foreign laws and regulations, and how to help them protect and enforce their IP throughout the region. So with that, I just thought I would share a quick slide on the different attachés throughout the region and throughout the world. And if you have one in your neighborhood, please do reach out to them. They're a great resource and understand the landscape in their region extremely well. Now, what I thought I would do is turning towards a little bit more on the topic of this session today, and I'll speak a little bit more about my transition to becoming an IP attaché in a moment. But I wanted to talk about the role innovation continues to play in the wake of the pandemic and how adaptable intellectual property and intellectual property systems are throughout the world. And I really wanted to talk about this because as I transitioned into this role and right on the heels of the pandemic, I arrived in Delhi just a couple days before a nationwide lockdown went into effect here in India. But I was able to also see the momentum that was generated across the innovative industries throughout the world to help solve these new problems. And that's what innovators do, we solve problems. And it was just really impressive to me that how IP came to play, whether it was existing IP or whether there was new intellectual property. The pace of innovation, to me, has just been impressive. And I don't think it would have otherwise been possible without having already a strong IP systems around the world that spur and incentivize innovation and invention. And as I mentioned, I arrived just before the nationwide lockdown here in Delhi, but we were all hoping that the pandemic would be over soon. But despite that, even though initially we thought, oh, okay, by June you'll be traveling again and traveling the world, but in reality, we all know that not to be the reality today. But regardless, right at the onset of the pandemic, innovators didn't wait. And they immediately saw a need and came up with innovative solutions to help solve the new problems the world was facing, and improving on their existing innovations to seek a cure or to make interacting in the virtual world more effective. So seeing a race to find drugs and vaccines to treat and shield others from infection. We've seen low-cost ventilators and personal protection devices. We've also seen on the high-tech side using AI to give a little shout out to our previous speaker, using AI to analyze virus infection trends and pandemic predictions. But I think the most alarming thing to me has been the innovations that have happened almost behind the scenes and at a very rapid pace on how we interact with each other. I know that just in the past 3 months, I've interactually systems like this one that helped me interact seamlessly with stakeholders, with governments, and to provide presentations like this one. So while we all praise the efforts of these innovators and all the great work that they've done, understanding that if we didn't have this foundation of IP, we wouldn't be where we are today or anywhere close to where we are today. We'd probably be much more along the lines of where we were back in the 1919 timeframe, early 1920s, with respect to the Spanish flu. So I think in the grand scheme of things, we're extremely fortunate, and I think we're fortunate because of a strong innovation in intellectual property system throughout the world. But that said, while we praise the efforts of innovators, and I'll speak a little bit more about some of the efforts the USPTO is undertaking with respect to that challenge, that ongoing challenge. So with respect to the adaptability of IP, I've given many betures to startups and early stage entrepreneurs about intellectual property, and I've always spoken about how there's this inherent, how the different types of IP between copyrights, patents, trademarks, and so on, have this inherent overlap so that they complement each other. And it's that way intentionally because IP is not a one-size-fits-all solution. But I never really anticipated the extent to which it would be true today. And enabling the adaptability of our IP systems as well. So not just the adaptability of IP itself, but how the IP offices around the world have been employing new mechanisms to help address new needs that came out of the COVID-19 pandemic with respect to extending deadlines and expanding the ability for the office and reviews and hearings, and also to be able to provide accelerated examination for those seeking to solve COVID-19 related problems. And so I'll talk a little bit about some of those resources that we've had come available just in the past few months here. So going back to transitioning here as from the regional director from the West Coast office at the USPTO to an IP attaché for South Asia, my job is very much focused on boots on the ground. I think travel is essentially over 50% of this role. And I said, well, how am I going to do this when we can't travel in the wake of the pandemic? And I think the good news here is that I've been at the USPTO now for over 30 years, and as I mentioned, most recently running the West Coast regional office. So I've become quite accustomed to working in the virtual environment. So to me, it was relatively seamless to transition those skills of a regional office to that of my new role here. And so as a result, instead of being worried that we're not interacting face to face, we've become very active in the South Asia office, working with industries and governments and enforcement officials, educators on complex issues that usually are reserved for face-to-face meetings. And there will always be things that will be better or more, more worthwhile through a face-to-face interaction. We all understand that, but it's a result of the strong relationships that we've had and built here in South Asia that enable us to now take those relationships virtual, at least for the time being. So it's worked extremely well. I've had quite a few webinars and virtual meetings with government officials that it was their very first virtual meeting ever. But it definitely wasn't their last. We now interact quite regularly virtually. So I do believe that we're able to continue the mission and the importance of interacting with IP stakeholders throughout the world, supporting US industries on the ground as they try to protect their rights around the world as well, through even this new era that we're living in. So with that, I wanted to take a moment, as I mentioned before, and talk about what the USPTO has been doing. In an agency of over 13,000 people, we have been on the forefront of telework programs, even within the US and the federal government within the US. And as a result of that, it's very, very rare that we've had to close our doors as a result of a weather closure or a natural disaster. And now we're finding that our preparedness has prepared us extremely well for operating seamlessly in the virtual environment of this pandemic. And as a result, our productivity and our ability to meet the needs of our customers and patent and trademark applicants has continued without delay. And so we've been extremely pleased to be able to do that. So I wanted to take a moment and talk about some of the programs that we've been doing. So as a result of being such a large agency with so many initiatives, we actually came up with a single page that brought together the different resources that we have to help address COVID-19. It's with patents, small and micro entities. As I mentioned before, we'll talk a little bit more about trademark counterfeiting and consumer fraud, as well as some international updates. And all these resources are available on our combined COVID-19 Response Resource Center page. So with respect to patents and licensing resources, we promote our pro bono program, which is a service that we offer for those that cannot afford to obtain a patent, whether to hire a patent attorney to help draft and prosecute their patent application for them. We also have the Patents for Partnerships platform. It's a lot of P's, but that platform helps to establish and connect those that are seeking to partner on particular topics, as well as some other special resources for inventors and entrepreneurs. In the interest of time, I'll go through these pretty quickly. We also, for innovation incentives, we have a prioritized examination pilot program, which for small and micro entities that are seeking to solve problems and have filed applications related to COVID-19, they can apply for expedited examination, and that if entered into the pilot program, it would be at no fee, so they don't have to pay the accelerated examination fee. And then we also have voluntary early publication of patent applications for those that want to get their inventions out in the public domain while their application is still being examined and prosecuted through the USPTO. With respect to trademark counterfeiting and consumer fraud, consumers that are falling victim to these counterfeiting activities. So as a health, a face mask that doesn't shield from the virus will give a false sense of safety to a consumer and may put them at undue risk.